Hello, I'm Victoria Blunt. Welcome back to the Green Room. My guest today is the glorious Matilda James. It's very casting focused, this one, so be prepared for lots of actor chat, some invaluable advice, and a couple of very loud bangs.
I think my downstairs neighbours are moving today. All I can hear is just like shouting and smashing of things. So I can't leave the flat because I'm too frightened.
As casting director and head of casting at Shakespeare's Globe for around 5 years, Matilda cast over 50 shows for them and for the Sam Wanamaker Playhouse. Since then, she's worked freelance across the UK, on the West End, on screen projects, and on Broadway. Matilda's also a freelance producer, and she's an exec producer of Citizens of the World, a choir for people who are seeking sanctuary in the UK. Her inclusive approach to casting and her constant drive to meet new talent means she's always in high demand and the perfect person for me to have in the green room. Can you explain for anyone who doesn't know what your job is, what exactly a casting director does?
For me, the interesting part of it is, when you've got a play, you live inside that play for so long with the director. They are picking it apart and you're picking it apart alongside them, trying to see what they want, trying to imagine who they can see playing those parts, bringing them to life, seeing what they're getting out of the play, trying to match that to people and having a load of people up your sleeve. I always think about it being like you're almost trying to see through the director's eyes, but kind of they don't know what they're looking for yet. So you're kind of seeing what those possibilities are. And my whole house just shook then from
I heard that.
Yes. They're really cross. I don't know what's going on, but they're not happy at all about moving. So yeah, it's a job that is about really, really liking actors, really liking scripts, really liking the conversations that match those things together. It's a space that is about finding the right person for those roles, keeping that conversation as broad and as transparent and as kind of rich as possible. Sometimes it's about listening to that director and being really attuned to what they're looking for, but also I think not being afraid to challenge that and say, and also there's a lot of kind of negotiation inevitably, partly obviously with kind of agents and things, but I've definitely worked on shows where a shared company of actors does 2 plays, and so you're trying to find the right people who could match both a classical play and a new play with different directors, sometimes a new play that hasn't yet been written, so how to try to sort of negotiate those things. I think it would be a terrible job to do if you didn't like actors. I don't know why you'd want to. Don't ever. No, it's a terrible idea.
When a director comes to you then and says, okay, Matilda, I've got this play, like for example, I've got Romeo and Juliet and I want to do it on a boat. what would be your like, which is obviously the next production I'm going to be putting together. What would be your kind of first steps of going about it, and what are the questions that you ask and what are the things that are kind of going around your head about it?
I would go back to the play and try and read the play with that vision in mind. And then you go to your databases of actors who you know and you like and who you've seen and stuff, or who you've met before. And you start putting together lists and you share those lists with the director, and they might go, oh yes, I know. And they might come with ideas. They might have they often come with people who they've worked with before or who they met in other audition things. It didn't work out with them yet, but I might like to meet them for that part, or so you put together this kind of big mass of people, all of whom could get the job. I think that's if I get nothing else across in this conversation, it's that casting directors don't bring you in unless they think you could get the job. There is simply no point, from my perspective, there's no point from a sort of admin time, any point of view, before you've even started the kind of human thing of trying to go, yeah, sure, I'm just going to bring someone in who I don't believe could get this. That, apart from anything that sort of sits in the kind of moral or ethical or empathetic setup, if you get the meeting, it's because you could get the job. Your job as an actor coming into that scenario is then to do your best work. And I feel like my job as a casting director is to set up a space which enables you to do your best work.
And I've auditioned for you before, and that was one of the most fun, easy auditions that just felt like being in a room and having creative conversations and just having fun. And it was such a lovely environment to be in, because I think you can, as an actor, sort of wind yourself up into a bit of a frenzy before you go into a room to meet someone, especially when you know that person, you know, cast for this and they've done that. And, you know, Matilda James in my head was this lady who's been at Shakespeare's Globe for a long time, and sort of had this image of who Matilda James is going to be. I was like, she's going to be quite old. She's going to be, they'll have built the Globe around her. She'll have been.
It's funny because so often when you bring people in, it's because you've seen them be brilliant in something else. Right. Like you know, you've seen them be great, and so it's very exciting for me. I always get and I, like, sort of slightly starstruck when you're like, but you were so good in that. Like I would never want an actor to leave feeling like it was a waste of their time.
Right. Yeah.
That feels to me like that would be my bad job, you know, badly done, because it's my job to give you the information ahead of time that allows you to prep so that 20 minutes is on your best terms, you know. Mm-hmm. And that information is where you're supposed to be, what time, what you're supposed to prep, you know, who you're going to be meeting, so that you can get it, you know, so that you're prepped as much as you can be to then have a word with yourself and get, you know, and then be like, I know how to do this. I know how to walk into a room and have a conversation with people. Yeah. And that's not to say that's easy at all, because I think it's incredibly difficult. And that's partly the reason I get starstruck, because I could never, ever, ever do it. I'm just endlessly amazed.
Have you been casting anything recently? What's been happening from your side?
Oh, well, I'd be lying if I'd say I was run off my feet, because imagine those days when we were just like, I can't move at being so busy. Yeah. I will never take that for granted or complain about it ever again. I'm never going to complain about anything ever again. That's definitely true. No, I'm working on a show with Northampton that Michael Oakley is directing, a new musical by April DeAngelis and Lucy Rivers called Gin Craze, which I'm really excited about, and was always planned to be in this spring, hadn't got bumped, but now, and then was a bit into the summer. But for the last 3 years, I've been working while freelance, also back at the Globe as a producer. So I was at the Globe for a chunk as casting director, then I left, then I came back as a producer, and I've been working on stuff on side. So it's always been slightly as a freelance thing, kind of matched by what I could do when.
How has the casting process changed? Has it all been self-tapes for this theatre show then?
Well, it was kind of amazing, actually. We got a few days in person. So it would have been October, when just before the tier system came in. Right. I feel like that patch is much more hard to imagine / remember than March. Like, Anne feels a lot longer away. You know, I can't really believe it happened, but it did. We did about 6 days in person. But the reason for that was it's a musical. It's a brand new piece of work. It's all kind of actor musician led, and the orchestration it's 8 actors, 8 actor musos, all being the orchestration will come out of what is sort of put together. We kind of needed to see what people could do, and we kind of set it up. So some people did remotely. We offered Zoom where possible. Also, some people who weren't able to kind of bring all of their instruments, or if they didn't want to play, you know, woodwind and stuff in a room, with people taped their instruments. But in the main, we were able to see people in real life.
Wow! And
it was amazing. It was really, really, really moving. It was so exciting to send out like details of an audition. It was so exciting to hear people come back and be wanting to do it. And in a moment where so much had been so grey, like seeing actors be brilliant was quite overwhelming. Just watching people come in and absolutely like smash it. over and over again, because actors are extraordinary. You know, people who were like not who hadn't been in a room since March, people who hadn't, you know, met anyone, been in a real life audition circumstance. Like it felt really exciting as a thing to be able to give to people, almost, you know, as an opportunity and as a way of just letting people kind of get in touch with that part of themselves again, because that feels to me like a really, you know how like when you will see a lot of your friends, you realize that you're different versions of yourself with different people.
Yeah.
And so you get to be all different versions of yourself because you see your friends. And then 12 months of not seeing anybody at all, and I feel like I've got out of touch with different parts of who I am because I just haven't been in contact with that person or with that kind of energy, or, you know, in those circumstances. So it was kind of really amazing seeing people just do what they do really well, which is act, sing, play in a way that they, which was really wonderful. Fingers crossed, touch wood, everything. We'll pick it up soon, and it will be something that you can go and see in the summer.
Is there a logic of how this is going to work when things come back up and running? Do you know if things that were pushed last year are just going to be put on first, or is it just going to be down to each individual theatre?
Yeah, I don't know at all. I think it's going to be, it's funny, isn't it? A show that I was supposed to be casting last year, it was quite clear quite early on that wasn't going to happen in the dates where it could have done. And it was quite clear early on that if timing allowed the theatre to open up again, that wouldn't be the right story to sit in an opening season after a whole, you know. So I think that's so weird. You kind of go, that's not going to be what the appetite is, or, you know, even from from the director's point of view, being like, that's not where I'd want to put my energy or whatever. Yeah. So I think like the idea of programming is complicated, isn't it? Because it's such a kind of, we want to be able to celebrate coming back together. We want to be able to like do that safely, but we also, there's such a period of kind of reflection. And I mean, I know from my perspective, I don't want to see anything that's about COVID at all for a very long time. No, thank you at all. But I do think that there's like, it will be interesting to see what comes out of the time, like what the kind of cultural conversation is around what do we want to see, you know, and what and how do we want to see it? I don't know.
What is the dream for you in like in the rebuilding of all of this? Like if we could just cut a load of this shit and just like have a great thing building up going forward, how would that look for you?
I keep thinking about how we're sort of in a GCSE history question from 20 years time, you know, one of the courses of X, Y, and Z. And, you know, what were the three main factors that led to the extraordinary resurgence of what, you know, there's a certain element of it which we'll just have to wait and see, except that I don't think our response can be passive. I don't, you know, how do we both wait and see what comes out in the wash at the same time as going, it's not about sitting back and waiting for someone else to put the answers together and then go, brilliant, I've got an audition, let's go. You know, it can't be that. It is going to be about people generating their own work. It is going to be about people agitating for themselves. It is going to be about people advocating for themselves and championing the work that they do, being brave enough to knock on doors and say, like, I'm here and this is what I want, at the same time as and people like me going, I've got to keep looking. I've got to keep, you know, don't get complacent. Don't say, I know who it is. Keep looking. I guess there's something about drama schools as well. You know, you don't want people coming out thinking, great, so now I've got all my skills. I've got all my things. I know my pieces and I know what I am. I will sit and wait for the phone to ring.
Yeah.
And because it's not going to be that. It can't be that.
How do you build your database of actors?
If only there were a sort of nice little algorithm, and then everything in the universe just gets downloaded. No, it's a lot of watching stuff, seeing things, going to the theatre in the days where we can, and being a real geek about it, writing everybody down, everybody who you see in things, who you think's great, and, you know, working out who they are and I personally keep a spreadsheet, but I know that everyone will have different ways of doing it.
Do you go to showcases, drama school showcases?
Yes, I do. I mean, I have done. I am not at the moment because of the circumstances, but trying to see as much as I can now. I'm really excited about the idea of meeting the graduates from this year and finding ways. And actually, I was talking to a director a little while ago who the project I think has been shifted on a little bit, but I think there are also people for whom they're really trying to engage those graduates who will be graduating in this environment or who graduated last year, and I think that work is really important. And I would say to anyone who wants to, I'm up for doing, I'd be really keen to do some generals with people who've graduated last year and who are coming up to it this year and who are coming out in that kind of uncertain way. Actually, Krishma said a really brilliant thing recently, which was about being perceived as a gatekeeper. And of course, there are lots of reasons to think that, you're the person who goes, yes, I'll bring you in, and no, I won't bring you in, and all of those things. However, the way that she put it was that the role of the gatekeeper is also to keep the gates open and not just to keep them shut. And I was really delighted by that as a phrase. It was definitely like, I'm nicking that, but it's true. I think that in that is the responsibility of the role, is to keep your eyes really wide, to keep looking. There has to be a continuation of the generosity that we've all been digging really deep to find with each other, because inevitably there will be holes in people's knowledge. More and more now there are open calls or using social media for casting calls, and particularly on screen work, and people coming in who haven't had quote unquote traditional training or whatever. And I think that's really, really, really exciting and laudable.
Our industry is called out a lot for lack of diversity, lack of inclusion. I suppose from a casting perspective I'm thinking of, but also along the lines of drama schools and stuff, how do you ensure that everybody's seen?
In order to make meaningful change, which is essential and necessary and madly overdue, it requires everybody to engage and to be believing in the need and the necessity and the urgency of doing it. There's a limit to how much talking we should do about it, and then just do it. And it will require certain people giving up power. That will require certain people going it's not my time to be in charge of those decisions anymore. And doing that and getting out of the way.
Yeah.
The thing with any leadership is that you need to be up for people robustly disagreeing with you and people robustly challenging you and holding you to account. And if you don't like it, well then fine, but don't put yourself in a position of leadership, because if you are that is what the job is. That is why you are paid the way you are. And I think it's really exciting knowing where that is shifting, and where people who are the class of the artistic directors, still a very small handful of people. So it's an exciting time in casting, I think, as so much of part of your job is to uphold the vision of that artistic director in the place where you're working. Even when you're working, they choose the creatives, they choose the other directors, they program their seasons, and you are alongside them working to uphold their kind of creative vision and to challenge other people to match it, and to really push those conversations along. But that's sort of what I mean about everyone has to be engaged with it, because you have to be pulling in the same direction.
How did you get into it? What was your route? Because you did a master's in radio, right? And you did...
Yeah, so I started out working in radio drama at the BBC, which was amazing. The output for Radio 3 and Radio 4 and World Service was extraordinary. This is quite a long time ago now. It was brilliant because as an assistant in that office, you do a bit of scripting, you do a bit of bringing agents to kind of be checking people's availabilities. You might be putting lists together. You're in studio. You're kind of giving feedback to people. You're kind of really involved, and then you're in studio watching the piece come together. So it's really as a sort of all in all. I don't know what I want to do, but I think I want to work in production. I think I want, I'd always wanted to work in the theatre. growing up in Cornwall on a farm without much sense of the theatre. Like, you know, my mum's parents would take us to the panto, and then, you know, we'd have these kind of amazing like local shows that would come up and play in the castle ruins, sort of, you know, or whatever kind of. And then growing up watching early knee-high stuff was really, really formative, and I just always wanted to sort of just thought it was magic. Some more banging here. You
were at the Globe when Emma Rice was artistic director, so weren't you?
Right. Yeah. So I worked for her first sort of summer and winter season, and then cast the first couple of shows of her second summer. Yeah. It was amazing. It was an amazing moment. There was a sort of really mad moment where Tristan and Isolde came to the Globe after I'd left at that point, but they brought it in, and I did there was a bit of recasting to do on that. So I did some lists for her, for Emma at that point. But the first time I saw Tristan and Isolde, Emma was in it at Restormel Castle in the first ever show, the first ever time they did it, which was 2003. And I watched it with my best mate, and we walked, and it was amazing. So Restormel Castle is like this 13th century castle ruins in Lostwithiel, which is where my grandparents lived.
Wow.
They, at the end, when she runs around with the flag, and she's running around the ramparts of the of this kind of tumble down thing. We were both in tears, and Emma was playing White Hands, and it was the best thing I'd ever seen. I was a tiny baby, like, you know, I was just about to go off to university, and we walked back to my grandparents' house, which was about 2.5 miles, just like weeping in silence, with my sister, who was a couple of years younger than us, who didn't really like theatre, who was just like, what's wrong with you two? Sobbing, unable to sort of bear the immensity of this emotional pain. But yeah, it was really extraordinary working with Emma. It was, you know, talk about being kind of starstruck from that moment. So I was always theatre, then did a master's in radio after I went to uni, and then joined radio drama. Then I worked at the BBC, so a bit of drama, and then I spent a year working in sport, which was on the London Olympics, which was quite accidental and sort of gloriously a very wrong fit for me. Like, I had an amazing time, and it taught me 1,000 things, lots of which were that I didn't want to work in sport. I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I sort of decided that I was going to give myself a year to try and find something in theatre. And a job came up at the Globe that I applied for, which wasn't casting director. I met Dominic Dromgoole, who was artistic director at the time, and at that point Charlotte Bevan, who was casting director before me, had got the job at the National, and so it so happened that I was in the right place at the right time. I didn't know that I was applying for that job. I wasn't applying for that job, but I ended up getting it, and it was completely mad. Oh, it was really amazing.
And you cast my dream job. You cast Hamlet Globe to Globe, which is a production that went to every country in the world. How do you even go about casting for that? Because your primary concern must be like, well, they better not be a knob.
Well, I mean, to be fair, that's sort of my primary concern most of the time. And I feel like if you're not a knob, you'll do really well. And that's a sort of words to the wise or whatever. That's your main thing. Like, focus on being a good person who people want to collaborate with and like having in the room. And you'll get loads more jobs than people who aren't that. It might not feel like it all the time, but it's definitely the case, because I think just in terms of going, who do I want to take on this journey with me as a director? People who are gonna make it really fun. It was very important for it to look like a company that came from the world, you know, and that wasn't just sort of trotting out with its own version of itself. Like, it was so in conversation with so many things. That project was born out of the Globe to Globe project that was part of the Cultural Olympiad in 2012, which was before I got there. all of these people who came and delivered their amazing shows and set up this kind of network of places around the world. And then Hamlet was kind of going out and being in conversation with them and with a thousand other places. And those actors who took that on are extraordinary. It's sort of amazing to me that show finished in 2016, April 24th, 2016, over the Shakespeare 400. And that it was kind of 6 weeks after that the referendum happened. And the idea of that project happening now is sort of quite baffling, I think.
What are the kind of pitfalls that you see actors falling into all of the time when you run auditions?
A very good question. I think the pitfalls are not having a handle on your nerves. And that's a sort of terrible thing to say in lots of ways, because it's a thing that inevitably only comes with practice. And that's hard to handle if you're not getting as many meetings as you want to be. But I think it's sort of lesson in treating it very much like part of a thing you do, like trying to compartmentalize your brain in terms of going, sure, I've got an audition today, and then I'm going to go to the gym, and then I'm going to meet a friend, or whatever it is. Like, it's built in. It's a way of kind of maintaining it being something that's built into your routine. The reality is there will be such a level of rejection, and having to get yourself to a point where you can handle it without it knocking who you are as a human. And that is kind of superhuman strength that I don't know how you manage, but if you can crack it, you'll be a lot happier, and you will make your auditions better. Other kind of pitfalls are props. Please don't. Not knowing the material well enough, or having learnt it so much that you then can't be flexible with it. I never want anyone to be off book. I don't think there are very, very, very few circumstances where I think it's essential to be off book, and certainly not for a first meeting. Maybe at recalls, or maybe if it's chemistry reading, or and so, obviously that's kind of sometimes more the case for screen, but like often what happens is you've had 48 hours to get through a whole heap of sides. Like, it's just it's not an interesting thing to me to know that you can remember lines. If you have 6 weeks to rehearse a play, then I really need you to be able to remember your lines. But up until that point, like, all it's doing is showing me that you've done that rather than, I think have made some interesting choices about what you've read. If you have questions, ask them. I think it's really interesting to know what will happen where we get back to the point. I hope we do, but what will be left in the residue of this about like how much self-taping will we do for theatre. I think so many people have gone out of London, so many people have recognised that is possible, that there will be kind of practicalities to, well, I'm not there, so I'm going to do my self-tape, and that's totally, there's lots of ways that's brought us a long way over this year where people were resistant. I think, just going into a room kind of calm, ready to listen and ready to play you can't go wrong if that's where you can get to.
What are the kind of most wild things that have happened from your side of the table?
Oh, crikey. There was an audition where someone pulled a chicken leg out of their trousers.
What?
Which I would just recommend not doing. That sort of goes under props, really. Just don't.
What was the context of that? They just pulled a chicken leg out.
It's a choice they'd made about a character they were playing, and that was quite hard to note, if I'm honest. But
I love that.
But I think all of those things kind of come from a place of anxiety. They come from a place of like, how am I more than myself? I feel like all those things come from a place of going, I don't know how to do this, so I'll try and introduce something that that is literally a prop, that is a thing that will allow me to feel stronger in this place, that will give me some clarity. And it's so reassuring when you watch actors being just in themselves. You know what it's like seeing them on stage, when you see someone being able to do the thing and you go, yeah, that's just a person walking around saying those words.
Not pulling pulled pork out their bra.
In an ideal world, less pulled pork from bras. Yeah, I love auditioning. I love auditions. I really do. I had an amazing experience auditioning in Doncaster a few years ago for a film I was working on, which had young leads, and we were doing a few days of kind of group casting of kids between about 11 and 17 at Cast in Doncaster. And the writer who was it was a play previously, play called Pond Life, which was then adapted into a film by Richard Cameron, who wrote the play, and directed by Bill Buckhurst. And Richard, who'd been a drama teacher and knew that patch so well, ran these sessions with these. And there was a kid who was 11 at the time, and the setup was it's an improvisation. One of you is at a bus stop watching someone you love leave, and the other one comes up, realizes that sees that they're upset and tries to cheer them up. And so there was this guy sat watching someone he loved leave, and he was kind of like one of the older kids in the group. And then this kid came up who was one of the youngest kids in the group, and he came up and he just sat down on the chair, and they were pretending to be in the bus shelter, and he kind of acted out putting his hands on the back of on the bar behind the bus shelter. So he was sort of leaning back, and he looked over at this lad who was literally 3 times the size of him, and he went, "Don't worry, boy. I remember back when I was your age, when I was 13. It'll all be all right." And it was so beautiful, this moment of imagination, that this tiny 11-year-old had imagined this extraordinary story where he was older and the kid who was in real life much older than him was younger than him. And that this whole story, and it was just so sweet, and so just completely clear in his head what he could see. Some real drilling going on. It was so clear what he could see, that was just it made you really think, oh yes, just lots of imagining, isn't it? And how brilliant it is where people can imagine something together and go, oh yeah, I believe that. I totally believed it. I totally believed that story that was being had.
There was one thing you'd want to tell someone who is just starting off on their career. Is there anything you just think, I'd love for people to take this away with them?
Well, I guess just just really listen to yourself and really think about what, if you're putting yourself in, if you've got a speech through, or you've got a scene through to look at, just really look at it, really listen to it, and see what connects with you. Because that's what you will be doing over a longer period of time if you were to get the part. And also, even if you don't get the part, don't make that time have been wasted for yourself, because you don't know when the next time will come up where you go, where you're looking at that play again, where you meet that director again, that casting director again. You don't know when, there are so many amazing plays. Read as much as you can, dive in to everything as much as you can. There are so many things that we can't control, but what we can do is try and be good people who work really hard and who finesse what it is that we do. And, and I really truly believe that being a good actor is a craft that is finessable, and that you can work at that, and that work doesn't go unnoticed. It also doesn't fit any one mold. It's not one thing that will look the same for everyone. Thank God, because how boring would that be if it were? But looking at your drama schools. But at the same time, that it is funny at this moment being gosh, there's just so many things that are out of our control. So what are the things that we can take control of and feel secure in, and then ready ourselves to not be able to control so many? How do we stay robust and secure in the face of so much uncertainty. I don't know exactly, but I know that freaking out about all the things we can't control is definitely not part of that answer.
It's not the one.
It's not the one. Try not to freak out about everything. That's all I've got.
Thank you so much, Matilda. Thank you.
Thanks very much for having me.
So that was my green room chat with Matilda James, and I've got to say, some of her advice has completely changed how I approach my work at the moment. So thank you, Matilda, for that, and I hope you guys found it as encouraging as I did. Next week is our final green room chat for the series, and we will be speaking with the legend himself, Ralph Little. Make sure you subscribe to hear it first. This podcast was recorded, edited and produced by me, Victoria Blunt, with an enormous amount of help this week from Alistair MacDonald. Music is by the musical maestro, Jerry Hickman.